Because we've got several things that are coming to a head in this country right now. We got the storms, we got the droughts, all of that. But I'm seeing a pattern coming out in the last few days that's very disturbing. Now, we've talked about it, but since that storm Tuesday with 100-mile-per-hour winds, guys, things really came out in the open on how the government is going to handle these grid problems that we're seeing, both from storms and from the loss of hydropower at Meade and Powell, possibly both within the next 6 weeks. And what we're seeing again, with Lake Meade, guys, is at 1039 plus change. Powell is about 10 plus feet away from it having to stop the turbines because of cavitation. And so with the no snow melt anywhere, not much rain getting to the rivers, and looking at all three charts, starting with Flaming Gorge, which I did, moving down to Lake Powell, then down to Lake Meade. Guys, Meade, you're looking at 3 weeks. You're no hydropower. Powell, again, about 6. And Powell feeds the backup to Meade, but Meade's going to go to that low point before Powell does, unless the Federal Bureau of Reclamation steps in and completely sacrifices Powell. If they do that, they will destroy the turbines. But in this situation, you know, all things are on the table. What you're seeing here is, again, an AI illustration, but it's 18-wheelers lined up at these big data centers. Now, the reason for the thumbnail, again, is in these storms Tuesday, you had the northwest corner of Indiana, which is Lake County, hit very hard. It's still over 100,000 people without power. 2 data centers were affected, and they had to be switched over, you know, for a few minutes to the battery power, then to diesel power. So I was checking on it, and they don't just have a grid problem as far as the power's out. They have roads that are clogged with trees. You've got big power lines down, things like that. And so what I dug into and found out that, yes, these are 2 smaller data centers, again, up in the Lake County area, just south of Lake Michigan. All of that's been put together there because you've got cheap lake water, right? Anyway, so as I was digging into the details, guys, I was asking, looking into what diesel shipments were going where, what power was on, what data centers were affected, trying to put it all together. And we're finding out, and it's still happening, that there are large gas lines, because with the power out, there's only a few stations that has gas and diesel, right? So you've got long lines and they're waiting. And now Indiana has issued out a statement asking people that if you're coming in from outside of that area to please gas up, fill up your car before you get there, because it's very scarce. And if you think about it, even the diesel trucks that bring in food, supplies, all of that, they stop at a truck stop and get their fuel, right? Right. And so those are being affected too. So I asked about what about the diesel supplies getting to the data centers? And the information I found out was they're getting there because they're being escorted by police. In other words, not the diesel going to the truck stops to get the food and things that we need in, or the fuel energy, whatever it is, guys, but it's only, the escorts are only to clear the way to get the diesel into the data centers. And so the obvious question is that, are they putting data over human needs? And it's very obvious that they are. Now, also, this is a very small area, and these were not hyperscale centers. The big hyperscale centers would take over 100 trucks a day each to come in to redo it. Now, these are smaller. It's not going to take that much, but it was an example of how the government is going to handle the situation. Again, the priority will be data centers over food and supply shipments. And the data centers had already pre-bought a lot of this diesel supply. Now, you'd say, well, in a case like major grid down situations, which we're about to see in the U.S., you think that they would come in and say, no, we got to take care of the people first. We got to get that food and all of that straightened out. But no, that's not how it's going to work out at all. Again, the big data centers have pre-bought the diesel under contracts, and that is not coming from the truck stops. These are outside big tank sources that were predetermined. Guys, the data centers, they even have sensors, I found out, in the big tanks. In other words, a lot of them will have 24 to 48, some even 72 hours of diesel inside their tanks at the data center. Well, they have sensors in them that connect to these diesel supply centers, again, not for the truck stops, that when that gets to a certain level, when diesel's getting low in the AI data tank, it signals for these trucks to start moving. You see what I'm saying? It's all set up, all pre-planned. Now, we have watched trouble moving into different areas. Then when you lose hydropower to Powell and to Meade, coming up in less than 2 months, you're losing the cushion for the hydropower, or that the hydropower provides, guys, and that's putting intense pressure on the Southwest grid. So how will this work out? If we look at the problem, we need to look at least what's going to happen, or even if there's not a solution, just look at how this will step forward. Or so imagine this. And when people get hungry or thirsty or hot with no air conditioning, things change. The human mentality changes, guys, the way they approach things. And so if you're stranded on the highway, or you can't get food to your local grocery stores, you can't put gas in your car to go to work, and you see these blue lights escorting major tanker trucks to the data centers, it's not going to go over very well. And that's going to start an internal conflict, and you could have bad actors involved just to escalate that, you know, maybe foreign bad actors, who knows. But there's going to be problems with it, because it's not just going to be in Indiana. Like I said, this is a worldwide problem. We are focused on the U.S. right now, but we are not far from seeing this happen, because it's not just the desert Southwest dams and hydro systems that are in trouble either. Remember, again, the grid snapback destroys our grid when the major data centers have to switch to backup power. That's not accounted for. Now, what will it lead to? How will it pan out? I mean, you're going to see the military police protecting the data centers. They say it's critical information. I understand all the banks are tied to it and all. And I just wonder how for hundreds and hundreds of years we made it with the banks and the police and everything else without AI. But now, you know, what I'm seeing, guys, is, and I've asked the questions, why now is AI so important? And first thing you'll find out is, well, the banks are tied to it. The U.S. government is tied to it, the military, and the banks is always first. And you realize that was set up on purpose? In other words, make someone dependent or something dependent on you. In other words, make the banking system of the world dependent on AI, and AI controls it. And that's what they've done. And so we're going to see the protection of the AI centers, but you're also going to see side factions. What you're seeing here, again, a depiction in the desert, possibly and a Mad Max situation. And what was the movies about? Stealing fuel, getting fuel and water and whatever else it was. It was all about a conflict over scarce resources. Now, in a desert situation like this, guys, which is not far away when you look around Temple Bar and at Hemingway Harbor and places like that. But again, it's going to go into I'm not putting this picture up just for the fun of it, because I'm putting it up because of the reality of what we may see. It may not go this extreme, but it may. In other words, just like we see in other countries, you get some civil unrest going on. You see people stealing gasoline from big trucks in India and Africa, different places like that. Battles over it, fights. You understand what I'm saying? you start seeing the civilization break apart and break down. Maybe that's part of the plan too. Who knows? I'm not going to keep you real long on this. I just wanted to point out, guys, we've got about 3 weeks plus left before Meade goes down as far as hydropower. Now remember, imagine if you're standing on that dam and you're looking downriver, Arizona's to your left and Nevada's to your right. At 10:35, all of the 12 turbines that are the normal turbines will be cut off, right? That's going to leave 4 of the 5 Whitehead turbines working, which will cut power and the cushion to the grid by 80%. Now, one thing about it is the 4 low head turbines are only on the Nevada side. And so when everything collapses, or when the hydro starts to shut off at Meade at 10:35 in a few weeks, only the Nevada side will have any hydropower at all going out. And that's going to be cut down to 20%, and that's going to decay weekly as the water pressure drops, the level of the water. So we're seeing the Desert Southwest hydro system completely vanish here very quickly, guys, and it's going to put immediate strain on the grids. And what they've done is built a giant silicon empire on a very fragile, small grid that cannot support it. Certainly they're not that naive. Something else has to be going on. Maybe it's just the planned destruction of all resources and thinning out the population of the planet. We'll just have to see. But the Indiana story, again, going back up there for just a second, you now had 4 days of storms that are repeating, and it's making it more difficult. Even I've seen floods that are like 7, 8, 10 foot tall, some of them going through these ground electrical base centers, guys. So there's a tremendous amount of damage. They're very lucky there's only 2 small data centers now that need a little bit of diesel. But you get into the hyperscale systems like we're seeing in North Virginia at Data Center Alley, and it changes the game. But again, the weakening of these 2 dams is going to destroy the grid in the Desert Southwest before too long. They overbuilt the system without the backup. That's typical, though, politicians. And thanks, everyone, for going over to our ad-free Patreon channel and signing in. It really takes the handcuffs off of creators because there are none there. No ads, no handcuffs. You know, we keep it clean. But, guys, things are changing on this platform so quickly when you're watching right now that it's almost hard for humans to deal with what we're seeing. So again, thank you for helping and preserving the information, guys. It's a heads up link below to Patreon. Be safe.